welcome again to my second video about my turn-based RPG, A Deathcaver's Trade. I've been at work on this one for around 4 or 5 months now, and I'm keen to share some of the progress I've made so far. So without further delay, I'll get right into it. The main focus area for the last 2 months has been getting the combat system fully working with the completed set of features. I overhauled some aspects of the AI, such as the pressurization and divine use screens, added hit chance to the UI, and added both the victory and defeat screens. For actual gameplay enhancements, I finally got around to adding an alternative to defending called Expect, which to be honest the name is up for debate, which raises your party members' evasion as opposed to their defense. I think this could be good for party members that are built more as casters, which won't benefit much from having their defense being temporarily raised. I also got around to adding a timer for party members that have been downed. Essentially you have to heal these party members in the time frame, otherwise they'll be out cold for the rest of the battle. Right now you can just heal them using basic healing spells, but I'm considering if there should be a separate revive item like in most RPGs. I've also added some new spell types, such as the healing spell, which can also be built into a direct damage dealing spell, and I've also added a spell which can add on to either a party member or enemy's turn delay, causing them to miss small turns before they can actually act. I'm actually planning on having my third enemy, this work in progress I'm calling the Mimicker, have this spell at its disposal, so this one will have to be targeted early, I hope. Finally, I got the inventory integrated into the battle sequences, so once per turn a player can refill their spell tanks if they need. Right now that's pretty much the only consumable that can be used in battle, but I'm sure I'll think of others soon enough. So with all of this added, and with loads and loads of bug fixes written to my too hastily written code, I finally could play out entire battles to see how they felt. To be honest, initially it didn't quite feel right, and so I started planning out how I could make the combat feel not only more challenging, but maybe more tactical too. So after my initial round of testing, my problem with the combat was that it felt like the spells themselves didn't have enough of a reason to exist. That, and the enemy AI felt like it wasn't acting as smart as it could be. So first things first, I set off to recalibrate my enemy AI script. I started by covering some edge cases. Singular enemies with only support spells shouldn't use them while they're alone, and enemies should always follow up their charging phase by actually using the spell that they had just charged up. Enemies should also only start considering defending or spell overloading when they're actually low on health as well. Already with these changes implemented, the AI was starting to feel more alive in each battle, although I still had to make the actual spells more relevant given how I want them to be a massive part of the overall combat system. I started by enabling the enemies to take in overrides for some of their stats. This way, Bloodlickers can be known for having a really high evasion, and Boulder Bugs for having a really high physical defense. It's not so high to require the player to use spells to counter, but really incentivizes it, I feel. This way I can equip a party member with an accuracy raise that targets the whole party, and another with a defense lower that targets enemies. Also, with the AI changes, it's now much more important to know which enemy should be targeted first, as allowing the Boulder Bug to charge and use its spell will result in all the enemies having a higher damage output. Similarly, Bloodlickers can either raise their evasion or lower your party's accuracy. However, these stat buffs and debuffs weren't just potent enough, so I boosted the currently implemented spells to make it so more spells can be used before a player has to refill a tank. Now, picking which spells to use for each area is far more important, requiring the player to plan out and discover what each area's enemies will actually require of them. Healing and direct damage dealing spells, as well as turn delay spells, also add another dimension to the combat, and I'm hoping other non-stat based spells can add to this. I'm planning on having one that removes all effects, both good and bad, and another which raises the revive time of each party member. As it stands now, I'm much happier with the state of the combat system, although it still needs some refinement and bug fixes. I really think that a good turn-based combat system would make good use of all the systems at its disposal, and so I hope that each mechanic I've added is well incentivized to the player. And given how I want the game to capture that early Final Fantasy feeling of discovering new enemies and learning how to combat them, I really hope each of the spell types have a place within the overall system. By the way, if you want to know a bit more about how the system works overall, be sure to check out the last devlog I did, which covers more of the core functionality of the game and the combat, just in case I didn't really cover it well enough here. I also made a few changes to the first layer of the Death Caves, mainly during the periods that I hated my code and wanted to do something completely different. I redid some terrain modeling from scratch to make it look a bit nicer and have a bit more depth, and also started to build out the first layer from the starting room. It's not much at the moment, but after I'm done with the combat system, I'll be focusing on this first layer, adding in secrets, interactables, and new areas. I'm hoping that by the end of it, it can really start to have that early FromSoft feel to it. My favourite addition has been this hand from a buried god sticking out of this aquifer. I think that having an NPC here to overlook their hand would be great. I've also started to work on what will become an underground temple area, which will snake around similarly to how the caves will. I'm excited to see how these caves will eventually play out. I'm planning on doing some final refinements to the combat system, well for now at least, and then moving on to developing the first layer of the Death Caves. I'd like to complete the map first and then populate it slowly with secrets, unlocked pathways, NPCs, and whatever else I can think of that might work well. I'd love to have the spells integrate into the world in some way beyond the lantern, maybe with areas that can only be accessed with certain spells or something like that. I'd also love to start adding VFX to the combat system, as well as create a proper audio system besides the placeholder stuff that I have at the moment. I think that'll go a long way in making the game feel more polished. I'm also planning on trying out a small test build to send out, which will pretty much just be to test the combat system, so if people are interested, I can always find a way to host that somewhere for download. It would probably just be a basic version of the first layer caverns, with a small set of enemies and spells, just to see from like friends and stuff if the combat system is actually fun to play. So that'll be something I'll probably start planning out once a bit more of development has happened. Thank you again for watching this video about my game. It's already made a lot of progress from when I started, and I'm keen to keep development going and see what I can end up with. At the moment, I'm working towards having pretty much a full MVP build of the first layer, including maybe a small village-style hub area and a couple of boss fights. I'd love for some of the next few smaller videos I do as well to focus on the story or maybe some lore, since I've been eager to start writing that all up from my notes. I also got a comment about setting up a Steam page, so that's something I might start looking into for this game as well. It might be good to do once I've got some good scenes and clips I can use for the store page. We'll see, I guess. Anyway, that's pretty much all for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one, where I'll hopefully be talking a bit more about the first layer of the Death Caves and introduce some of the secrets that it will hold.